We've been discussing it over these 2 days, yesterday and today. It's ripe enough finally, because it was quite raw at the beginning, but we are sort of happy to the extent that what we wanted to include is there.
But there were controversial areas, and let's just talk about them. The one that everybody's going to pick up on is the bits in brackets at the end that talks about basically a temporary suspension from the Eurozone. There's no such thing as a temporary suspension.
Well, there isn't, but the Prime Ministers have to agree on that, whether they would leave it in the document. But as you can see in the discussion, the Grexit was no longer a taboo. It was discussed, and now it's even found its place in the document, although it's in bracketed terms, because for the leaders to decide whether to leave it or not.
Because there's two alternatives, isn't there? On the one side, there's the alternative that if these measures are put forward, then you go forward with an ESM proposal, with actually to consider it. The other alternative is Grexit.
Exactly. But we're calling it timeout, which means that it will be temporary, managed. The country would get all the help it needs, but it will be in control of its own destiny. The exchange rate would be flexible, and they would get as much as help as possible.
Let's just talk about that.
It could well be that the Greek people would say that's the better option.
Right, but a timeout, as you elegantly are calling it in the document, a timeout involves all the same issues as a Grexit.
Yeah.
A parallel currency, a new currency, a revaluation of denominations, of loans and deposits. So is it just being polite to call it timeout?
No. I mean, we are saying that we'd prefer Greece to stay in. However, it has to be convincing enough. There should be trust enough for the bailout to work out, because this is the third time. No,
but I understand that. But the fact that you haven't just said leave the Eurozone, but you're calling it a timeout, dressing it up as a suspension.
Because before it was like a stick. You do this or else. Now it could be an option which, at least, if we have to resort to that, let's say the conditions are not met, and we have to resort to that by default, then obviously you need it to be the less upsetting as much as possible for Europe, for the Eurozone, and also for Greece itself.
There's also a very interesting section on privatization, where you're basically suggesting if you're not going to privatize yourself, we'll put the funds or we'll put the assets into escrow, and we'll privatize for you.
Yes, but the option, again, that's in brackets for the leaders to decide. But the first option is that the privatization unit is really independent with all the expertise, and it carries on with the privatization, especially of the electricity sector. The other option would be for the revenue which comes from that privatization, which would be managed by the Greek in a Luxembourg institution, however, by the Greeks themselves.
Tell me, as we come to an end here, tell me what the mood was like in the meeting. Obviously serious, but bearing in mind that Donald Tusk had said today was the day, or this weekend was the weekend, not to come out of this weekend with a very firm yes or no is smacking of fudge.
No, we've been saying this is the last day, and it wasn't. But I do believe now that this is it. In other words,
because you're going to kick. Because if this document, if you take this document at its face value, Greece now has to do some more things, and if they don't do that, you've then got to come back and have some more discussions.
No, but the reason for that was with the lack of trust. Trust was lost completely, and the only way to get it was not by word of mouth, by text, or even by legislation. It's by implementation. So we put everything, we upfronted all the conditions, so that we will see the Greek government really going into the motions of implementing the much needed basic conditions. Now, if we do that, then we'll decide to go for the negotiations.